Oh, that's nice. All right. So, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be back together again. And you've got others that are trying to join at the time. And thank you for your prayers last week. Things went well at camp meeting. There is a series that will be coming out later this month. This is June, called Lessons from COVID. Lessons from COVID. So keep your eyes and ears out for that. At right now, it's probably about 10-hour long seminar, and I still have to record it. Gave most of it at camp meeting this last week. I'm going to record it, have some things to add to it, and then it will be available and will be challenging, I'm sure. But this evening, we're going to be looking at the Daniel Challenge, part 1, and we're going to hone in on the biblical diet. And then part 2, we're going to hone in on some other aspects of Daniel's life. But let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful again that you are a loving, wonderful, merciful God, and that we have the opportunity of coming and studying your word, that beautiful word, the revelation of the truth. And Lord, as we do study, we ask for your Holy Spirit to be here with us and for you to teach us and guide us and work out your perfect will and way, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, let's just go to our Bibles, because we're going to be studying Daniel and the life of Daniel. And Daniel, he is a type of God's people. And when I say type, there are a couple of terms that we use when it comes to prophecy. And one of those terms is a type. And when we look at the sanctuary service as well, we look at type and we look at antitype. The type is something that represents something else. So the type is the thing that represents something else, and the antitype is the thing that it represents. And Daniel is a type. He is a representation. His life represents the life of something or someone else. And Daniel, as one of the prophets bringing end time messages to God's people, Daniel is a type of God's end time people who will be alive when these prophecies will be fulfilled. And so it's very important for us to understand not just what Daniel says and the prophecies that he speaks, but also looking at his life and how he lives, because that life is an example to us of how our lives should be and must be in these last days. And so as we get into this particular topic, we're going to, of course, look at the book of Daniel. So let's go there, get your Bibles, and we're going to go to Daniel, and we're going to have somebody read the first 7 verses, 1 through 7. Who would like to read? All right, Portia.
In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuch, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children of whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat, and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. unto whom the prince of the eunuch gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name of Belshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and Azariah of Abednego.
All right. So we're getting an introduction into the life of Daniel. We don't have anything about Daniel previously when he was in Israel or Judah, and in the area of Jerusalem. All we know is Daniel in captivity. And so we are getting some history about when this came about. We're not going to look at the history today. We've got a different focus for this evening. We'll look at that history more succinctly next time, next week when we cover more information. But let's go ahead and keep reading Daniel 1 and verses 8 through 13. Who would like to read that?
I'll attempt to read that.
All right, Elvie.
Let me get myself positioned here. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be examined before you, and the countenances of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants.
So it's interesting because I don't remember if it was Lancet or New England Journal of Medicine, which one of those, but it was a major major one of the medical journals. And they cited this trial as the very first clinical trial in recorded history. So here you have Daniel and his three friends that are proposing that they're treated differently. So you have a treatment group versus a control group who are going about with the regular king's fare. And now you're going to evaluate them for a period of time. You're going to separate two treatment groups, and then you're going to evaluate to see which one actually has the greater outcome. And so this is how clinical trials are set up when it comes to health and medicine and other things of that nature. And so this is the first recorded clinical trial in the history of the world. So how does it come out? How does it come out? Daniel chapter 1 and verses 14 through 21. Who would like to read those?
I can.
All right, go ahead, Delene.
So he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melsar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus.
Amen. Thank you. So yeah, amazing. I mean, you have these young men, and after 3 years of education, I mean, it's not even a 4-year degree; it's a 3-year degree. They are 10 times wiser, 10 times smarter, and so on than even all their teachers and all of the established wise men. And so that's quite remarkable. Part of it is because they were conscientious and diligent students, but part of it is because of the special blessing of God. Right? So why wouldn't Daniel and his 3 friends eat the king's meat and drink the king's wine? Why wouldn't they go there? Obviously, there was some danger associated with their request, because they were told in verse 10, he said, the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. So imagine if here's the prince of the eunuchs. I mean, he's trusted by the king. And this guy is afraid he's going to lose his head with the king if he goes through this thing and it doesn't work out well. So how reluctant do you think the king would be to take off the heads of some captives that have just come from another country? Well, not at all. So this is a very dangerous thing that Daniel and his friends are doing. And if they would have been faced with imprisonment, or if they would have been faced with death, if they didn't eat the king's food and drink the king's wine, what do you think they would have done? Like if they had not been permitted to enter into this test, do you think they would have gone ahead and said, okay, well, we're going to die anyway. So, life is better than death. All right, health and healthy things are one thing, but it's for the purpose. Why do you have healthy things? It's for the purpose of life. And so why would you expend or give up your life for the purpose of healthy things? Wouldn't it make sense to take the unhealthy things and continue to live? Now, that's obviously not what they did. And I don't believe it's what they would have done. Right? Could God have blessed them as he did bless them if they had made concessions as the others who came with them did? Because Daniel and his 3 friends were not the only ones that were taken from Babylon. In fact, we find that there were thousands of individuals that were taken from Babylon and removed. When we look at the reports in 2 Kings and so on, you've got thousands, 10,000 sometimes of individuals that were taken. So they're only they're only a few of many, but they're the only ones that stood up. So what does the Bible have to say about what we put into our bodies, and is it important? So let's go through this topic and let's look at what the Bible has to say about what we put into our bodies. And let's go back to the beginning. In Genesis, the creation, Genesis chapter 1 and verse 29. Genesis 1 and verse 29. Who would like to read this passage?
And God said, see, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food.
Amen. Thank you. Read well. So yeah, he's given them every herb which yields seed, bearing seed, right? And every tree yielding seed. So really, what does this boil down to? It boils down to grains, right? So you have the herb of the field yielding seed, and you have nuts and seeds, which are yielding seed, and then you have the fruits, which also yield seed, right? So you have fruits, you've got nuts and seeds, and you have grains. This was the original diet in which God created for human beings. This was the ideal diet for human beings. But then something happened, right? This was the ideal diet for human beings until, well, Eve, she ate a fruit she wasn't supposed to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And from there, and then her bringing it to Adam and Adam eating as well, and sin entering into the world, there was a lot of things that happened. And so if we move just a couple chapters over now to Genesis chapter 3 and verses 18 and 19, we find that there is now a change that's made in the diet. So Genesis 3 and verses 18 and 19, let's look at that. Who wants to read? Got a lot of shy people tonight. All right, Portia.
Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herbs of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it was thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return.
Mhm. So up until this point, until sin came into the picture, everything was alive, everything was fresh, everything was new, everything was wonderful, right? But now we have the introduction of thorns and thistles that's going to come about, and now they're going to eat the herb of the field. Now, the herb of the field was given to the animals. That was what the animals were to eat, the herb of the field. Now man is given that to eat, and he is removed from the tree of life. Now, if we look down at in verses 23 and 24, it says, therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove the man out, and he placed him in the east of the Garden of Eden. Cherubims with a flaming sword turned every which way to keep the way of the tree of life. So nobody was allowed access to the tree of life after sin. So the tree of life was taken away as a dietary factor, but they were given something in exchange for it, and that was the herb of the field. So in other words, vegetables became a part of the fare. And so out in the context of sin, now the ideal diet included fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, right? So not only did you eat the seed-bearing part and the fruity part of the plant, but you also ate the leaves, and you eat the stem, and you eat the roots, and so on and so forth. Now, how do we go from that, from a diet of fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables, to one that includes meat and dairy and fats and sugars and so on, all of this processed stuff? Well, let's follow that question through the Bible to get our answer. So as time progressed, of course, wickedness became well nigh universal, and God decided to destroy his creation with the exception of a small remnant, right? Noah and his family. And during the flood, the vegetation, the livestock, other than what was preserved on the ark, was destroyed. And Noah and his family faced a very grim prospect. It would take at least a full season to plant crops and be able to reap the harvest. It would take several years for fruit trees to grow and to bear fruit. So how would they sustain themselves? Well, enter dietary addition number 2, Genesis 9 and verses 2 through 4. Let's look at that. Genesis chapter 9 and verses 2 through 4. Who wants to read that one? And if you want to read, just unmute yourself, and then I'll choose whoever does. Merlin. Not Merlin. Okay, Merlin.
And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat.
Okay. So in the context of the flood, when there's not crops, there's not additional food and all that kind of stuff, they are then given the ability to then expand their diet. And they're going to expand their diet in consuming now flesh foods, in addition to the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds that they had access to previously. And of course, this is in an emergency situation where they just, it's going to take a while. It's going to take time before they can get some additional food. Now, if we go back to Genesis chapter 7 and verse 2, we'll find something that it was not just you can eat anything. It wasn't just anything. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 7 and verse 2. And who would like to read that? All right, Portia.
Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by 7, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female.
Okay. So there were clean beasts and there were unclean beasts, even back before the flood. It was recognized that some animals were clean, other ones were unclean. And so there was a distinction that was made. And what we will find later as we go through Exodus and Leviticus and some other things, we'll find that it was not the unclean animals that they were permitted to eat, but it was the clean animals. So after the flood, you have the introduction of the eating of clean animals, but not with the blood in it. The blood needed to be drained out. Now, there's another thing that goes along with this as we go backwards, Genesis chapter 6 and verses 5 and 3. Verses 5 and 3. So reading verse 5 first and then verse 3. Who would like to read that? All right, Merlin.
That's fine. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of wickedness. And God is now saying he's going to change the longevity of man. And at this time, the predominant trend is that individuals live past 900 years. Nobody that we have of record in the Bible made it to 1,000. Methuselah was the closest at 969. But then what happens after this time? Well, we have Noah. Noah lived to 950 years. But after the flood, there's a significant trend that we see happening, indeed fulfilling what God mentioned in here in Genesis chapter 6. So Shem, who was born to Noah, was 100 years old when the flood came. Well, he lived 500 years afterwards. He was 600 years old. Arphaxad was 438. Selah was 433. Eber was at 464, and then boom, we drop off to Peleg and Reu at 239, and then Serug at 230, and then Nahor, who was Abraham's grandfather, was 148. Terah did better at 205. Abraham was 175. Isaac made it to 180. Jacob at 147, and then we get to Joseph, boom, 110. Right, so we see a definite decline, a very rapid decline in the longevity of individuals. And there are multiple factors that play into this. There was a change of the environment of the earth that happened after the flood. But also one of the things that contributes to this, one of the things that contributes to this is the diet, the additions to the diet that then started knocking down on the longevity of individuals. And these dietary patterns continue to get worse over time until we get to Joseph's day. Again, 110 years from Noah back at 950 years, significant decrease. So what do we know about Joseph's day? Well, Joseph was in Egypt, and the bondage of the Egyptians came after Joseph's time. And Egypt was not necessarily a healthy place. Let's look at that. Exodus 15 and verse 26. Let's go to Exodus chapter 15 and verse 26. And whoever gets that, you can read. All right, Linda.
Kezia, go ahead.
And said, if you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, give ear to his commandments and all his statutes, and I will put none of the diseases on you which I have brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you.
Ah, very good. Very
Amen.
good. All right, so again, we've got a situation where the Egyptians, they were not exactly the healthiest people in the world, right? And we know that now. We've been able to study Egyptian mummies and do MRIs and CAT scans and all sorts of stuff with them. And what we've been able to find out is that these Egyptians, they suffered from arthritis, they suffered from diabetes, they suffered from cardiovascular disease, they suffered from obesity, they suffered from cancer, they suffered from almost all the stuff that we're dealing with nowadays. That's what they had back then. And God was telling them, hang on, if you do what I ask you to do, right, then I'm going to save you from all this stuff. So the Israelites had been in Egypt for 400 years. They had been slaves for 400 years. And so they'd been in this culture, they'd been in this environment. I mean, I come from the United States of America. The United States is only 245 years old, right, as a nation. So they've been all of that time plus another 150 years, right, in Egypt. So you can imagine how well established the patterns and the habits that they had of the Egyptians. And then God seeks to extract them, to take them out of Egypt. And when he does so, he's going to seek to extract them not only from the place, but also from the food. So let's go to Exodus chapter 16 and verses 3 through 4. We're right there. We were just at 15. Now let's take it to Exodus 16 and verses 3 and 4. Who would like to read that? Well, let's see. We had last time LV came up. Let's have LV read that one.
Okay. Verses 3 and 4 of chapter 16. And it says, and the children of Israel said to them, oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not.
So they've left Egypt. They're on their journey. They've crossed the Red Sea. They've brought provisions for a few days, but the few days are running out, and they're starting to look at their provisions and going, hang on. We thought we were going like northeast. We're going south, and south is desert. And we're not going in the right, and we're going into really bad desert. And there's no place for us to get food and to cultivate food and do all that kind of stuff out here. So they start complaining. And God says, don't complain. I'm going to give you bread from heaven. Now, we're also told that this bread from heaven looked like coriander seed, the manna. He's going to feed them with manna. Manna means, what is it? That's, when they went out to find, they were like, what is this? They saw it all over the place. What is it? And they were told, this is manna, collect it, you can eat it. And so he fed them with angels' food, with heavenly bread. For 40 years, he fed them with the manna. And it was sweet like honey. and it kind of melted, and you could do all sorts of stuff with it. You could bake it and you could cook it and you could do all sorts of things with it, this manna. And he kept these millions of Israelites alive in the desert without a source of food on this manna for years. You think they were joyful and grateful to God for all that they received? Yeah, not so much. Let's go to Numbers 11. Numbers 11 and verses 4 through 6. Numbers 11, 4 through 6. And who wants to read that? All right, Delene.
And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes.
Poor me, poor me, poor me. All right. They're being fed with bread from heaven and they're complaining. They're complaining. Oh, we had such a variety of food before. Now we don't have a variety. We've got the same thing that we have to eat every day, every day, every day, every day. I wonder if the angels complain like that. No, I don't think so. So, you know, they got problems. They got problems. They're here, they've got food, they're complaining about the food. And so they want something else. They want variety. They're complaining, they want something other than this worthless manna. So they asked for it. So let's go down to verses 31 to 34, same chapter, Numbers chapter 11 and verses 31 to 34. Who would like to read that? And if you want to read, just unmute yourself. And if it's multiple, I'll choose one. If it's just you, I'll choose you.
Okay.
All right, Marla.
And there went forth a wind from the Lord, and brought quails from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. And the people stood up all that day and all that night, and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. He that gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattava, because there they buried the people that lusted.
So, did God know that the quail was not the best food for them? Sure, he knew. He gave them what was best for them, right? He gave them manna, bread from heaven, angels' food. They had the best stuff. But you know what? They weren't content with it. So they wanted something else, and they kept asking for something else, and they wouldn't be content with what they had. So did God give them what they wanted? Yeah. Even though it wasn't the best, even though it wasn't the best for them. Now, that's something that we need to understand, that, what should I say? If we persist in asking for and desiring something that may not be the best for us or is positively harmful, God might give it to us anyway, because we are persistent and we want to have our way. Right? He may do that, just like he did with the Israelites. And there's a lot of them that died when they ate that quail. I can only imagine what that was like. I mean, 2 cubits, it's 18 inches, so it's 1.5 feet. It's 3 feet deep, 3 feet deep with quail. For a day's journey, a day's journey was considered to be about 20 miles. So for 20 miles to the camp on that side, 20 miles to the camp on that side, all around them, 3 feet deep, they had quail. And they went out killing, and then drying and all that kind of stuff so that they could have this food. And they had plenty of it. They just hoarded this stuff. and then they died eating it. Now, there are some restrictions as far as diet is concerned that were given in the Bible. We'll go back to Leviticus and chapter 7. Look at chapter 7 and verses 22 to 27. Leviticus 7, 22 to 27. And who would like to read that? All right, Charles.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, Ye shall eat no manner of fat of ox, or of sheep, or of goat, and the fat of the beast that dieth of itself, and the fat that which is torn with beasts, may be used in any other use. But ye shall in no wise eat of it. For whatsoever eateth the fat of the beast, of which men offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, even the soul that eateth it shall be cut off from his people. Moreover, ye shall eat no manner of blood, whether it be of fowl or of beast, in any of your dwellings. Whatsoever soul it be that eateth any manner of blood, even that soul shall be cut off from his people.
Yeah. So just briefly, what it says is don't eat fat, don't eat blood, right? That was not for them to eat. And so if you had an animal that you were eating, then you were to cut off the fat, you were to drain out the blood. It was not to be strangled. It wasn't to die from any other way. You were to cut it and then bleed it out. And then you were just left basically with the muscle to eat. Now, let's look a little bit more closely at clean and unclean, the laws related to that. So we're going to go a few chapters over to Leviticus chapter 11. And let's look at verses 1 through 3, verse 9, and verse 13. Leviticus 11, verses 1 through 3, 9, and 13. Who would like to read that? All right, Alvi.
1 through 3, then 9 and 13 of 11. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the animals which you may eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Among the beasts, whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hoofs and chewing the cud, that you may eat. 9. These you may eat of all that are in the water. Whatever in the water has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, that you may eat. And then 13. And these ye shall regard as an abomination among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination: the eagle, the vulture, the buzzard.
And it goes on with a longer list of a bunch of carnivorous birds. Now let's look at verses 21 and 22 and 46 and 47. 21 and 22 and 46 and 47. All right, Althea.
Yet these may he eat of every flying creature which goeth upon all four, which have legs above their feet, to leap withal upon the earth. 22, even these of them he may eat, the locust after his kind, and the ball locust after his kind, and the beetle after his kind, and the grasshopper after his kind. 46 says, This is the law of the beast, and of the fowl, and of every living creature that moveth upon the waters, and of every creature that creepeth upon the earth, to make the difference between the unclean and the clean, and between the beasts that may be eaten and the beasts that may not be eaten.
Yes. So back in 27, it says whatever 26. No, sorry, 22. it talks about those that have 4 legs and that jump. And then it talks about the beetle in the King James version that really is actually a type of locust. So in essence, it was okay for them to eat locusts and grasshoppers. That was considered clean. I don't know that I would be happy eating locusts or grasshoppers. If I did, it would have to be deep fried.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. No, thanks. Um, yeah, so the clean meats, that was you were only to eat that which was clean, and of the land animals, those that had a split hoof and chewed the cud. If it didn't chew the cud, it wasn't. If it just chewed the cud, but it didn't have a split hoof, then you wouldn't eat that, like horses and donkeys and other things like that. If it did have a split hoof, but it didn't chew the cud, like camels were not on the happy list, and other things of that nature, then you weren't to eat it. Also, if it was something in the sea life, then only if it had fins and scales. If it had scales but no fins, don't eat it. If it had fins but no scales, don't eat it. So catfish would not be on the list. It was, crabs and other things like that, mussels, clams, other things of that nature. None of those would be on the list of clean foods. And then from the birds, typically the birds that were available to eat were your non-predatory birds. So if you had hawks or eagles or vultures or owls or other things of that nature, where you had predatory birds that were feeding on other birds or dead animals or other things like that, they were not on the list of clean animals. And then of course you had locusts and grasshoppers, which are plant consumers, right? They're all eating plants. You were never to eat a carnivore. So, you couldn't eat cats or dogs or, other carnivorous animals. Those were all off the list. And nothing that was sick, nothing that was lame, nothing that died because it was caught and killed by another animal, or nothing that died of its own sickness. You weren't to eat any of those things either. And then you were not to consume any fat or blood. So these are all the specific details that were given in the Old Testament in regards to what things that one could eat or should eat, and so on. Now let's fast forward to the New Testament, and we begin to see some controversies that arose in the New Testament around food. We run into another problem with diet, and this time the controversy arose amongst the Gentile believers who were converted to Christianity. And coming from a background of pagan worship, these new believers were accustomed to their food being offered to or blessed by idols, like we have in the case right here, right? And in those early New Testament times, it was customary for some of the meat in the meat markets to be offered to idols before being put out for sale. But it was not common for other foods like fruits and vegetables to be offered to the idols. So a new convert to Christianity would walk through the market thinking that any meat you purchased might have been offered to an idol, but the fruits and the vegetables that were offered there were likely not offered to an idol. So there were some Christian converts that realized that, well, hey, an idol is nothing. And there's only one God anyway. So to them, it really didn't matter if the meat had possibly been offered to an idol. But other Christian converts, they felt that they couldn't eat the meat in the markets because if they did, they would somehow be giving allegiance to the idols that the meat had been offered to. And these latter converts avoided eating meat altogether for fear that they might be eating something that had been offered to an idol. So let's enter into this controversy and see how Paul seeks to address this controversy. Let's look at that in Romans chapter 14. There was a question, where do ducks fall? Ducks fall in the clean meat category. So they eat plants, they don't eat animals. So Romans 14, and let's begin in verses 2 through 4. Romans 14 and verses 2 through 4. Who would like to read that? Nessie.
Okay, Romans 14, 2 and to 4. One believeth that he may eat all things, another who is weak eateth herbs. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth, for God hath received him. Who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. Yea, ye shall be holden up, for God is able to make him stand.
Yes, God can do this. He can make him stand. So each is to stand before God based upon their own convictions. And when we look at verses 16, the latter half of 16, verse 6 and verse 7, it says, he that eateth to the Lord, for he giveth God thanks. And he that eateth not to the Lord, he eateth not, and giveth God thanks. For none of us liveth to himself, and no man dieth to himself. And then he goes on in verses 13 to 23, and I'll just go ahead and read that. Verses 13 to 23, he says, let us not therefore judge one another anymore, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way. I know and am persuaded by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing unclean of itself, but to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. But if thy brother be grieved that thy meat now, with thy meat, now walkest thou not charitably. Destroy not him with thy meat for whom Christ died. Let not then your good be evil spoken of. For the kingdom of God is not meat and drink, but righteousness and peace and joy in the Holy Ghost. For he that in these things serveth Christ is acceptable to God and approved of men. Let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace, and the things wherewith one may edify another. For meat destroy not the work of God. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for that man who eateth with offense. It is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth, or is offended, or is made weak. Hast thou faith? Have it to thyself before God. Happy is he that condemneth him not himself in that thing which he alloweth. And he that doubteth is damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith. For whatsoever is not of faith is sin. All right, so this is a little confusing. So let's just break it down a little bit. What is Paul saying here? Well, Paul is saying that those who are weak believe that idols or something. So if food was offered to an idol, they wouldn't eat it. But there were others who were strong, and they knew that idols were nothing. So it didn't matter to them if food was offered to an idol or not. They would eat it anyway, because it didn't matter to them, because it just didn't matter. And then he said, if one does not eat meat from the market, well, they don't eat it because they're wanting to please God. But if somebody else does eat meat from the market, well, they eat it because they're wanting to please God. Whether the one eats it or the one doesn't eat it, both of them are doing it to please God. So neither was to condemn the other for what they ate or what the other one ate or didn't eat. Each was to be left to the judgment of God, who is the one who alone knows what's in the heart. And if they're doing what they're doing to please God according to the light that they have, great. God accepts that as reasonable service, and he's happy with it. And if the others are doing what they're doing, the opposite direction, because of the light that they have, that's what they understand, and they're seeking to please God, well, fine. God is happy with that. But if you go and you eat meat from the market, and you do so in the presence of your neighbor, and that neighbor conscientiously refrains from doing that, and you do that, you eat the meat in front of your brother to prove that you're strong and that they're weak, well, that is wrong. That's wrong. That's not a good behavior. That's not a good attitude to have. So everything must be done with our neighbor's best interests in mind. And so we must consider what we consider to be okay we must then consider what our neighbor believes and what might what our influence might do to them. And so Paul takes this discussion up again in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. So let's go there, 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and verses 7 through 13. 1 Corinthians 8, 7 through 13. And who would like to read that? Or Linda. Linda, assistant.
However, there is not in everyone that knowledge, for some with consciousness of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. But beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block for those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish, for whom Christ died. But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble.
Oh, thank you. Beautiful. And I love your translation because it's much easier to understand. So what we're hearing here is that what we choose to eat or what we choose to not eat doesn't earn brownie points with us for God. Well, I mean, for us with God, right? You don't earn brownie points with God by choosing to eat this or to choose to eat that. So what matters is making an informed decision that one believes will honor God. That's really what matters in this whole matter. But we must consider our neighbor and their weaknesses. So if I don't believe an idol is anything, and I know that I'm free to eat whatever is offered to an idol, well, okay, that's fine. That's fine. But if my neighbor believes an idol is something, and that eating what is offered to an idol is wrong, then if my example of eating what my neighbor believes is wrong, even if I don't believe that it's wrong, if that leads my neighbor to go against their conscience and to eat what they believe is wrong, then I have led my neighbor into sin by my example. And in doing so, I am wrong. And so what is Paul's conclusion with all of this? His conclusion with all of this is, I will eat no flesh, lest I make my brother to offend. So he felt free. He knows an idol is nothing. He knows that you're not defiled by what goes into you. And so he felt free to be able to consume anything that was offered to an idol or not offered to an idol. He didn't care for himself. But if it would make his brother stumble, he would never eat meat again, rather than to make his brother stumble. And I think this is a really cool principle, a really neat principle of the early Christian church, where there was such a concern for and a concession to the weaker brethren, and not a bad concession, that we might all be in harmony and go together, right? Now, this issue it was a huge issue throughout the Gentile church. And so the issue came all the way back to the Jerusalem Council. And so Paul brought this issue, a bunch of the disciples and the apostles are there, and they're working through this issue. They're praying about it, they're discussing it. And then there's a conclusion that they come to based upon their prayerful discussions. And in Acts 15 and verses 28 and 29, we read the conclusion. And who would like to read that conclusion? All right. Merlin, you're on the top of my list.
For it seemed good to the Holy Ghost and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessary things, that ye abstain from meats offered to idols, and from blood, and from things strangled, and from fornication, from which if ye keep yourselves, ye shall do well, fare ye well.
Yeah. So they thought, let's just make it simple for everyone. Let's just make it simple for everyone. Let's not eat meat offered to idols, even if you think it's okay. It's not really a big issue in and of itself, but there are plenty of new converts, of brethren that are coming into the church, and for them, it's a stumbling block, and we are not going to put a stumbling block in their way. We're just not going to do it. That's what he said in Romans 14 and verse 13. If you go back to there, we read over that, Romans 14 and verse 13. And it says, let us not therefore judge one another anymore, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way. This is the principle. It's the principle, not putting a stumbling block in your brother's way. Now, is it important what we put into our bodies? And Paul is not making the argument that it's not important what you eat and no, we can just eat anything and everything. No, 1 Corinthians 6, 19 and 20 has a bit to say. This is still Paul writing in 1 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 6 and verses 19 and 20. What does that say? Who wants to read it? All right, Portia.
What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which you have of God, and ye are not your own, for ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's.
Okay, so you're not your own. It's not your body. It's God's body, and you can't just do anything you want to with God's body. You're a steward of his body, and so you must steward it well. Now, Althea, you came up, and so let's go back a few chapters. 1 Corinthians 3 and verses 16 and 17. 1 Corinthians 3, 16 and 17. We'll have Althea read.
Okay, 16. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are.
Yeah. So you are the temple. And if you don't take care of it well, it's not going to go well in the end, right? Because you have a stewardship and you need to be faithful to that stewardship. And while we are told in Romans 14:14 that there is nothing unclean in and of itself, he says, I know and I'm persuaded by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing unclean in and of itself. But to him that esteemeth something to be unclean, to him it is unclean. Right? So he's convinced that really there's nothing unclean from that standpoint. But if you believe something is bad, well, you shouldn't be eating what you think is bad. Right? Now, this point is made about the things coming into you versus the things going out of you. Jesus himself makes this point in Mark chapter 7 and verses 1 through 9. And again, we've got to pull all of this together and put it into context. Mark 7, 1 through 9. Who would like to read that? You know what? I'll read it. Then came together unto him the Pharisees and certain of the scribes which came from Jerusalem, and when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is to say, with unwashen hands. Oh, heaven forbid, they were eating before they washed their hands. Found fault. And the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands off, eat not. holding the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the market, except they wash, they eat not, and many other things there be, which they have received to hold, as the washing of cups and of pots and brazen vessels and of tables. That when then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, why walk not the disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands? He answered and said unto them, well hath Isaiah prophesied of you, hypocrites, as it is written, this people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. For laying aside the commandments of God, ye hold the tradition of men, as the washing of pots and cups and many other such like things do ye. And he said unto them, full well ye reject the commandments of God, that ye may keep your own traditions. Then he goes on to give examples of how they do that. Now, is Jesus saying that you should never wash your plates after you eat on them? You should never wash a bowl after you eat it. Just leave the muck in there and the dirtiness and all that kind of stuff, and just let it accumulate. And the next meal, you can accumulate some more, and eventually you have all this bunch of grit and grime. Is he saying that we should never take a bath? We should never wash our hands or anything of that nature? No. Please don't go there. No, he's not saying that. He is a God of cleanliness. He is a God of order. We see much of that in the Old Testament. He's just saying that's not the problem. The problem is not what comes in. The problem is what comes out. What is it that's in your heart? What is the stuff that's there? That's the problem. Now we have a situation with Peter. Peter had an occurrence that happened, and this is in Acts chapter 10. Acts chapter 10, we'll go there, and verses 9 through 20 and verse 28. So Acts chapter 10, 9 through 20 and verse 28. And it's a long passage. I'm going to go ahead and read it. It says, on the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh to the city, Peter went up on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. So that was midday. That was about noontime. And he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, or they got the food ready, he fell into a trance. He had a vision, and he saw heaven open and a certain vessel descending unto him, and it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth. So there's this big sheet held up by the four corners, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again a second time, what God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done thrice, 3 times, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now, while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, so he didn't know what this meant, behold, men were sent who were sent from Cornelius, a centurion, a Gentile, had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, was lodged there. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, behold, 3 men seek thee. Right? So the Spirit is telling him there are 3 guys that are down there and they're looking for you. And if we go down to verse 28, Peter then takes individuals and they go to Cornelius's house and they visit with them, which was they were not supposed to do. This was not supposed to happen. Jews were not to go into the homes of Gentiles. And here's what Peter says in verse 28. He said to them, the Gentiles, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come unto one of another nation. But God hath showed me. Where did God show him? In this vision of the sheet coming down with all sorts of animals in it, and the Lord saying, kill and eat. And Peter saying, no, I've never done that. God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. So this vision of the sheet coming down was not God telling Peter, now you can eat anything and everything and it's okay and it's not, it's not an issue. No, it was not that. He was trying to break Peter of his stronghold, of his Jewish exclusivism, of not being willing to go and really to minister to the Gentiles. And it took this vision and it took the experience of going to Cornelius's house and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit for him to then come to the realization, oh, Wow, salvation is for the Gentiles too. Now, what was done away with at the cross? Well, the law, but which law? Was it the Ten Commandments law that was done away with? We're going to cover this more in fullness later. But when Jesus died, was it somehow okay now to sin? Like, was it okay for somebody now to kill somebody else or to commit adultery or to do other things of that nature? Did Jesus die and his death now made it okay for you to steal or to lie or to bear false witness or to covet or to worship idols or to do other things of that nature? Well, no. It was not okay to do all of those things. What law was put away with? It was the ceremonial law. It was the ceremonial law of the sacrifices and the blood and the ceremonial system of cleansing and other things like that, because all of that pointed towards Christ. And here, the one who was the object of that now had come in living flesh and had become the sacrifice for us. And so all of that sacrificial system was done away. But because Jesus died, did pigs all of a sudden become health food? Well, no, of course not. And we haven't done ourselves any favors in our industrialized meat production nowadays. I mean, you've got animals that are grown and crowded in unsanitary conditions. Even clean meats like poultry are full of disease. And in order to increase growth rates to produce more meat for the market sooner, hormones are given to animals, which are passed on to you and I. And because of the unsanitary conditions, antibiotics have to be used to stem the infection. Those are passed on to us as well. Sometimes animals are so sick and diseased that they barely make it to market for slaughter. And then we eat them. And not only that, in many places around the world, commercial animals like beef and poultry are being fed carcass meal. So dead animals or unused parts of animals are processed into foods, right? Like what you have in your dog food and your cat food, and that's fed back to the animals that they then consume them. So animals that were clean are now carnivorous. They're sick, they're drugged up. Is it any wonder that we have problems, right? Well, then there's the argument that, well, Jesus ate fish. Well, yes, Jesus did eat fish. Nearly 2,000 years have lapsed between Jesus' day and ours, and many things have happened on this planet in the interim. We don't live in the same world that Jesus lived in 2,000 years ago. This is a satellite picture of Pearl Lake. This is where I grew up. I swam in this lake. I canoed in this lake. I fished in this lake. We caught baby alligators in this lake. Thankfully, the big alligators didn't catch us in this lake. And one of our neighbors lived on this lake since the 1940s. And I remember going to his house and seeing a picture on his wall of that lake in the 1960s. And the water was clear. It was blue. There were several springs that fed this lake all of the time. It was pure. Now, if you caught a bass and you ate that bass, that fish out of that lake in the 1940s and the 1960s, it would be something entirely different than catching a bass in that lake today and eating it, because you can't see more than about 2 feet down into this murky water anymore. There are no more springs. There's no more fresh water, but there's still fish in there, but it's not the same. It's just not the same as it was before. And the Bible talks about that. Let's go back to Hosea. Hosea chapter 4. Hosea chapter 4 and verses 2 through 3. Hosea chapter 4 and verses 2 through 3. We're coming in for a landing here. Hosea 4 and verses 2 and 3. Who would like to read? All right, Delene.
By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out, and blood toucheth blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwelleth therein shall languish, with the beasts of the field and with the fowls of heaven. Yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away.
So because of man's sin, the animal population is being injured. They're being polluted, right? You didn't have this stuff back in Jesus' day. We don't have the industrial pollution and the accumulation of that. I mean, now even in the Alaskan headwaters, there are PCBs and there's lead and there's other things that you can find that then accumulate in the salmon and other things that are up in those areas. We don't have untouched areas of this planet anymore. And we can look at things from a lawful versus beneficial standpoint. Paul brought up this argument, 1 Corinthians 6, 12 and 13. In 1 Corinthians 6 and verses 12 and 13, we're told that all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Meats for the belly and belly for the meats. But God shall not destroy, but God shall destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. So Paul has an argument here. He is taking he is basically entering into a hypothetical discussion with others. Arguments that he has seen and he has heard from others, and he is going to make their argument and then he's going to respond. So their argument is here in blue. All things are lawful for me. What is Paul's response? But not everything is helpful, right? Yeah, it might be lawful. I might have the freedom to be able to do something, but not everything that I have the freedom to do is actually helpful. The argument that they make is all things are lawful for me. And he says, hang on, but I'm not going to be brought under the power of anything else. So if I do things that brings me under the power of something else, well, it might be lawful for me to do, but it's not the best thing for me. The argument was food for the stomach and stomach for the food. But he says, well, God will destroy both it and them, right? So Paul is showing that the Christian is really concerned about what is beneficial, what will build up, rather than what one can get away with. A Christian's approach is not to see how close you can get to the cliff before you fall off. The Christian's approach is to stay as far away from the cliff as possible so that you don't even worry about falling off the cliff. But remember the Garden of Eden diet, the diet that God chose for humanity before sin ever entered the picture? That was God's ideal for us. But soon he's going to return to take us home. It's not too long that we're going to be at the marriage supper of the Lamb. And I want you to just a brief exercise now. Let's close our eyes and let's imagine that Jesus has come. He's taken us to heaven. We have the marriage supper of the Lamb, this long table that's spread out before us, and there's an abundant feast that we're going to have. Jesus is there with us, and we're going to eat. Now, with that table in front of you, how many see Snickers, Doritos, fried chicken, KFC, fried fish, saltfish, beef? Anybody see a big slab of pork, ham up there? No. Okay, what do you see? Well, you see clusters of grapes. Maybe you see almonds, walnuts. You see other types of fruits and so on. That's there. Yeah, that's what you see. Open your eyes. Right? When we even in our sinful state, when we conceptualize heaven, oh, it's a beautiful picture. And we don't see all of the stuff that we're consuming nowadays, all the processed foods, the meats and other things like that. I mean, how many of you think that you're going to be in heaven and you're going to chase the chicken down, you're going to cut off its head, you're going to bleed it out, you're going to pluck all the feathers off of it, and then you're going to do something to fix it and other things like that? Yeah, you see manna on there. You're going to do that? No. You're going to chase down a cow and slit its throat and bleed it out and do all that kind of stuff in heaven? No. That's not what God created us for in the beginning. And it's not what he's bringing us to in the end. Yes, there have been concessions that have been made because of sin. Eating vegetables. I mean, I don't think we're going to eat vegetables in heaven, except for the leaves of the tree of, the tree of life. But it's pretty much going to be the original diet, fruits and grains, nuts and seeds, And that's what we're going to have. And he's seeking to restore us to that. We've had sin, and during this sin, we have waddled through a bunch of stuff, and God is seeking to restore us and to redeem us back. Right? He calls out to us. Paul himself calls out to us. 2 Corinthians 6:17. He says, wherefore come out from among them and be ye separate. saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. He says in 1 John 2, 15 to 17, he says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. In the context of the lust of the flesh, why do you eat what you eat? It's because it tastes good, or is it because it is good? If you choose to eat what you eat because it tastes good, then your appetite has a greater claim on you than God does. And your tongue and your taste becomes an idol. Our decisions must be based upon what is good rather than what simply tastes good. We're told in 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do all to the glory of God. And this is exactly what Daniel and his friends did. When we're reading about their life and we're reading about their story, and we're going to go more in depth with it next time and look at other aspects of it. We're just focusing on the dietary components now, but they were faithful to God. They saw that this was something that was important. It was life important, right? They would have faced death rather than gone ahead and eaten the king's meat and the wine and everything, because they saw that there were moral principles involved in this. There are moral principles involved in it. And we need to see that, and we need to understand that. And we need to recognize that God is seeking to save us from these things and save us into something that is better. And it's time to prepare for heaven now. He's coming soon. There's not much time to prepare. So let that preparation be now. And he tells us in Revelation 3:21, to him that overcometh, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, even as I overcame and am sat down with my Father on his throne. He is coming soon. So let's get ready to meet him when he comes. And yes, our diet is a part of that preparation. Now, there's a greater context in which this health challenge came to Daniel and his friends. And that greater context has very real implications to us in this whole COVID pandemic crisis. And we're going to look at that more fully next week, as well as other aspects of Daniel's life and what it has to teach us about these last days. But we must learn these lessons. We must. God has placed it in his word for us, that we might be blessed and benefited by the life of Daniel. So next week, we're going to look at the Daniel Challenge Part 2 and look at some of these other aspects as well. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, what an awesome God you are. Oh, such an awesome God. And Lord, we ask for you to draw us close to you. May we lay our food, may we lay our diet, our choices before you. And like Paul mentioned in 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether you eat or drink or whatsoever you do all to the glory of God. May we do everything to your glory. May we allow those things to go away that we know is not the best. Yes, they taste good. Yes, we like them. Yes, we're familiar with them. Yes, they're comfort food. But may you become our comfort. And you become our strength. And may we take up only those things which are best, because this body is yours. It's your temple. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for working in such marvelous ways and being so kind and patient with us. And now, Lord, give us the impetus, give us the strength, give us the fortitude to give up those things that we must, and to take up those things that we should, that we might be more and more like our Jesus. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Mhm. All right. Well, it's a pleasure. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Dr. Mark, I need to talk about with the duck. What did you say with the concerning the duck?
It would be considered a clean animal. Yeah,
I
like
thought the
chickens.
wet feet thing wasn't.
Yeah, no. That the cloven hoof has to do with your land animals, right? As far as the birds are concerned, basically the birds that are off the list are ones that are carnivores, ones that are eating other birds or eating dead stuff. Like you wouldn't eat a crow, and you wouldn't eat an owl, and you wouldn't eat eagle or a vulture or other things of that nature. But the plant-eating birds, the seed-eating birds, and other things like that were considered to be clean. And ducks eat, plants off the bottom of the lake and that kind of stuff.
That is new for me.
Yes, for
I
me
mean,
too,
I
because
don't
I
eat meat at
always
all,
thought,
but that is new for me. I've always thought that duck, even when I ate meat, I would not have eaten duck because I thought it was unclean.
yes, I was brought up that way also, that duck, because of the web it feet and it eats all kind of stuff on the ground. And they say it was a scavenger.
Okay. Well, that's my understanding of what I have read, but if I miss something, I'll go back and read that again, and then I can clarify next time.
Thank you. I mean, I don't eat meat, I just was curious.
Yeah.
So,
'Cause-
so the reason why we're not eating meat now is because of the diseases and all of that stuff. Is that our reason, or because I'm thinking, where does it be vegetarian and plant-based and vegan come in? If
Right. It is definitely a healthier way of eating. And God, again, we have descended into sin. And we have descended fairly far into sin, and God is seeking to redeem us out of that sin. And he created us in the beginning with a perfect environment and a perfect life and a perfect diet and a perfect school and a perfect home, right? He did that, and he is seeking to bring us back around to those perfect things in time, right? In heaven, when he comes to restore us, and then in the earth made new, he's going to be restoring us to what he created us for in the beginning. And there is Paul says, come out and be separate, says the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing. And that means many different things. He wants to save us from sin. He wants us to save us from the things that bind us. He wants to save us from the appetites and the passions that draw us to the world and so on. He wants to redeem us out of that. And there will be a people that will be ready for him to come. And part of that readiness is every aspect of your life. It's every aspect of your life. You look at what you dress, how you dress. You look at what you feed on from an entertainment standpoint. You look at what you feed on from a food standpoint. You look at how you take care of your body and the rest that you get, and whether you overwork and other things like that, and whether you're getting your fresh air and sunshine and so on. All of those are factors that when you love the one whom you live in their body, right? Because we're stewards of God's temple, his body. Then when we love him, then we want to do everything to make it as healthy as possible. And there is plenty of evidence that shows one of the biggest things that you can do from a health standpoint is to cut out animal foods and animal products and eat plants. Just that move alone is huge when it comes to almost any disease condition that you can think of. And then the other one that's really huge is cutting out the processed foods and eating foods more how they grow. Those two things go a huge way when it comes to the diet and how an individual, the health that an individual has.
okay, my last one is who made a rule about the Jews not going to non-Jews' houses and all of that rubbish? I mean, I know it went back from Nehemiah time, and when the 10 tribes were taken away and the Syrians came into Jerusalem or Judea and they all mixed and whatever. But I mean, who came up with that dumb rule? Who got credit for that? I just want to know who got credit for that.
Yeah, well, it was a tradition. So it was a tradition of the elders. And so I'm not sure that we can lay a finger at somebody's feet and say, okay, well, it was this rabbi or it was this individual that said, don't ever go there. But a pattern of thinking of separatism that came into and found itself manifested in various different laws and regulations and rules and so on. Yeah.
All right, I'm just saying, like, I mean, it's even now, like, if we say, oh, I'm not gonna go to somebody's house because they're African American or because they're from the Caribbean. I mean, we all, I mean, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
not a, it was, yeah, it was, you know, Jesus, did he go to, you know, was he exclusive? No, he wasn't exclusive. He went on the trip all the way out to Tyre and Sidon, which was a long journey, so that he could run across the Phoenician woman whose daughter was being, you know, tormented by devils. He went all of that way just so that he could interact with her, just so that he could teach his disciples a lesson that the blessings of God are not exclusive for the Jews, it includes the Gentiles as well. But they didn't get their lesson. So there was more that he had to do in order to convince them that no, this is not the way.
Yeah, but I mean, who would want to worship a God who sets one group above everybody, and everybody else is like the peasant, and like, you know, you guys are the queen of the crop when you're supposed to set the example and have them be included in the club. Instead,
Right.
you lock the gate and tell them they can't come in, and you don't want to talk to them. So,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All
I
right.
agree. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, good luck with that one.
Mhm. All right. God bless. It's late. Time to go.
All right. Have a good night.
See you next week.
Good night, everyone.
Lord's
All right.
willing.
Yes.